I am Erik Spiekermann. I was born in a little village near Stadthagen in northern Germany, near Hanover. We call it Hangover actually because it's a boring place. On the 30th of May 1947. And I am a designer. I'm afraid I didn't use the usual route to get into design. I studied history of art and architecture, but while I was doing so, I ran a print shop, which I started when I was 12. I got into design when my print shop burned down, because when I didn't have the machines and type, I made sketches instead. And I guess that's when you call it yourself a designer, when you make sketches for other people to work from. I did an apprenticeship at a typesetting, a type shop in Berlin. So I came home from school at 2 o'clock and went to the printers. So I learned to typeset and to print properly, while I also went to high school. I gave up my letterpress shop when it burned down in ’77 because if you don't have a letterpress shop, it's very difficult to print. That was the call from somebody, the god of typography or whoever it was, to say, okay, Spiekermann, Spiekerdude, you're now going to sketch instead. You know, you can carry your equipment with you rather than having to have trucks to move it around. And that was it. And I started working in photo setting and just basically marking up type for typesetters. So I was the in-between the art directors who would turn up at 6 o'clock at night and want the stuff back at 9 in the morning. I was the night shift typographer in London. And I don't think I ever had a full-time job. I've only ever been employed by myself. I was always freelance. I worked for, you know, the typesetters and printers in London, and then I worked for some agencies, and then I did a lot of freelance work for Wolf Olins in, I think I started work for them in '76 or '77, yeah, about after the fire. And then I got into what they called corporate design, which I didn't know existed before. And because I was German in London, they hired me first to help them with typography, because this is the time when photo setting happened. I was getting big, and people were already designing exclusive typefaces, but they didn't know how to put them into production. And I had a background with Berthold, a type foundry in Germany, where I'd taken classes. I knew some of the people, and I used some of their equipment. So I connected the people who were drawing type in London to the people who were actually making it in Germany in photo setting. And so I became a kind of, I think I called myself a typographic consultant for a while. I knew all the technology guys. I know the Icarus guys who invented the first outline software to create fonts, and I knew the people who made it, the linotypes, the monotypes. For some reason, I knew them all over time. So I was the go-between typographic solutions for large corporate design programs. When I was at Wolf Olins in London, and I was working on their German clients, they had a couple of clients that, or when it came to a certain phase, when it came to production and stuff, they said, well, why don't you take these over? So, you know, you're the German guy, you go and work with the German client, you do the implementation, you know the concept. So basically they set me up, and then in '79 I started meta design with a couple of partners, because we had this job given to us to do the corporate design for a German bank. And the name meta design already said what we wanted to do, namely to the design for design. So we were the guideline guys. We made guidelines for other designers to work from. And that's how it started in '79. And then I moved from London back to Berlin in '81, kept commuting for a while. And then meta design grew and grew and grew and grew. And then when it had 200 people, I left 20 years later. The idea of FontShop came about because, as I said earlier, I'd been doing a lot of work for foundries, typesetting companies, whatever. So I knew everybody in the type business, which I'm talking about the early 80s here, mid 80s was very small. The A-type high maybe was 100 people, and everybody who was anybody in type was there. It was a cartel, as it were. You know, people would meet and make deals. You know, you give me a license for Concord, I give you one to Palatino. That sort of stuff went on all over the place. Very much an old boys network in a sense. So there was nobody. So we thought, okay, I know everybody. I can persuade them to give us consignment, which they did. I think our first consignment was like 800 discs that we put in the cellar below the meta design office, and called it FontShop because we were selling fonts, so it was FontShop, generic, luckily. So that's how it started. One desk at the meta design office and a cellar with a metal door. And then we placed ads in the trade magazines in Germany, and then the orders came in. It was quite a nice little business. And now it employs, you know, I don't know, a few hundred people worldwide. It's kind of cool. Over time then, after about a year or so, all the kids were starting to design their own, because this is when Fontographer had come out, so kids were designing their own typefaces. So we said, look, somebody's got to publish this, because they weren't going to go to monotype or linotype, it's too boring for them. They needed like a cooler label, as it were. So we said, let's be the cool label. Unfortunately, we didn't know anything about branding at the time, so we didn't have a branding hierarchy. We just called it FontShop, FontFont, you know what I mean? It was a significant bunch of stuff that actually has survived. I reckon Just Hands were in there. This is, I think, 90 or 91, I don't even remember. So that was the publishing arm, as it were, the FontFonts. And then friends came out, like Ed Cleary was in Toronto, a Brit who I'd worked with in London, came up, and a couple of other people from other countries came up and said, hey, we also want to do this FontShop stuff. So we said, okay, fair enough. You can use the name, you can use the logo, as it were, the black and yellow trade dress. You can call yourself FontShop and you pay us a franchise fee. So we started a company called FontShop International to look after those guys. I think it's a pretty strong brand, mainly because it's got that generic name, and we just reduced it down to black and yellow, which at the time was, conscious. We said, this is digital, so we have light on, light off, so black and white. And what's the pixel? A square, so we had two squares, a black square and a white square. And as that was a little too subtle, we made the white square yellow, because yellow is also the color of light kind of thing. I am still a major shareholder in FSI, in the publishers of FontFonts. But as shareholder, I have no executive role. I do sit on the type board. I think I'm the only one who's been on the type board forever. Other people change, new ones come in, people go out. But we want that, obviously. With Joan, my ex-wife, who's still there, we're the major shareholders. We kind of like the parents in a way, because it's still a family, and they're all they're all our kids, and there's been very little change, which is good and bad. The people at FontShop in Germany have been there for 20 years, which is scary in a way. Even in America now, there's some people who've been there for a while. So we're kind of like the parents, but also the grandparents, and also the brothers and the sisters, and the ass kickers, and the troubleshooters. So while I have no executive role, I get asked my opinion, and I say my opinion even when I'm not getting asked for it, obviously. So it's kind of like an undefined rule, but everybody knows that they can call me. And some people are scared of me, which is also good. I do represent the beginning, which is kind of important. There is consistency, there is a history, which I think people like. And I'm also still a designer. I'm a type designer a little bit, but I'm really a designer. I run a studio that now has 80 odd people again. So I represent the people who buy type. And I think that's a very, very useful involvement. That I see both ends. I know what we need and how our habits have changed and what we want has changed. So I see myself in there pretty much as a defender of the designer's rights and issues. Some cultures are more visual than others. Places where people read a lot, where people publish a lot, where people sell a lot, are conducive to type. The reason we have more than one typeface is because of selling, not because of books. Books were always set in one typeface for 100 years, and then another fashion came along, or another technology came along, and we went from wood blocks to metal to engraving to lithography. That's how type changed. Until we had the Industrial Revolution, we made more than we could sell, from our shops, and we invented advertising. My favorite jobs have been those like the German railways, where I designed all this type for them, because they're so visible, because they're everywhere. They're there as much as Starbucks is here. Generally, there is a look of the country, which is basically half a dozen brands. And in Europe, the state brands are a little bigger than they would be here. So if you travel in Germany, you see the German railways everywhere. So designing their color scheme for their rolling stock and their logos and their type is a major contribution to the visual culture. So if you do that badly, you mess it up. I happen to, I think, have done it nicely, so I got the Federal Design Prize for that, because they realized that it's not because the design is so great, but because it is a contribution to the visual culture of the country. And you have a responsibility, and if you mess it up badly, the place looks ugly. You can always tell what the mood in a certain society even is by looking at their typefaces. It's like skirts, fashion. Shoes is another one to tell. Skirts going up or down, or headwear or whatever. Type is one of those indicators of culture, both economic conditions and the visual culture. So that's the general thing. I don't know where it's going technically, but I know that there's a common denominator, and the craft that I've learned and that I teach pretty much involves making it look as good and useful as possible. I think I'm always going to be involved, because my passion and my interest is language. Not just type, but type happens to be the visual manifestation of language. So it adds to language that fantastic visual shape, all the history, all the technology. I think it's a fantastic field that is one of our major cultural contributions. We couldn't survive 1 minute without type. And if type was poorer, we'd be poorer for it. So it's a great mission, and also happens to be a livelihood. So I'm pretty lucky. I'm doing what I like doing. Not many people can say that for themselves, right?